I take it that if you're here tonight, you have a great desire to be able to share what's very dear to you, the knowledge of Jesus Christ, with your friends. Otherwise, I take it you wouldn't be here. And I also take it that perhaps you have conversations with your friends. I know I do, but you're not quite sure how to go that next step. How do you take conversations and lead it proactively to an engagement with the text of the Bible? So obviously you're doing that now. What led to that in your case?
Okay, let's go back, because that's exactly where I was at. I was the king of the warm conversation. And what I was doing, I was effectively going to bed at night going, well done, Richard, you managed to mention Jesus today. In other words, I was propping up my own faith by actually managing to mention Jesus. But the reality was, intellectually interesting conversations over lunch or coffee or whatever it was blew off in the wind. I mean, how many times when you actually manage to mention Jesus does it lead to something? You know, are you able to give a book? Are you able to take someone to a special event? The answer is very, very rarely. So I was living off that. I thought I was doing the right thing, mentioning Jesus, but I look back and actually what I was doing was propping up my own faith. Hardly ever did those conversations go anywhere. So what transformed that? Should we get to that?
Yeah.
I thought I'd cracked evangelism. I lined up Professor John Lennox, who is a personal friend of mine, to take on Europe's most powerful insurance broker, a man whose nickname was Golden Tonsils. And I thought, brilliant. I mean, I've been praying for that kind of thing to occur. And John very kindly said he would come down from Oxford University and see my friend, and we'd have dinner. And I thought, job done. You know, I mean, I shall just pass the bread rolls and make sure that the water is passed and the coffee is passed, and I will watch Professor John Lennox will answer all the questions for my non-Christian friend. In other words, I believed actually, looking back, that evangelism was done by the professionals. I'd fallen into the mindset that my job was to get someone to a thing like Christianity Explored, or to come to an evangelistic event, hand them over to the professionals. So I handed over my friend to Professor John Lennox, and we had 2 3.5-hour debates over dinner. 7 hours of conversation over 2 dinners. And it was like watching a mismatched finals at Wimbledon. Because on one side, my friend went off like a demented ACAT gun, thoroughly enjoying the intellectual challenge, and John Lennox aced the ball back on every single occasion with a biblical answer, but my friend had no context because he didn't know the Bible. So he didn't know what to do with the answer, so he just fired another shot. And this went on as 7 hours of debate. And I found myself, and of course I'd been praying that these dinners would occur, I found myself saying, in frustration actually, I can't see the point in having another one of these dinners. And my friend said, no, why? He said, I love it. It's intellectually so challenging when you get John down from Oxford University. I love these debates. And I turned to him and said, no, look, for once in your life, and I've known him a long time, I've found a subject that you know absolutely nothing about. You are biblically ignorant. And before you beat yourself up, I'm not actually surprised. We don't go to church as a nation. You haven't been reading the Bible. And if at school you had it, it probably was out of context. You know, you probably had Daniel went into the lion's den one week, Noah put the animals in the ark the following week, Jesus was born for Christmas, and then we had the event of Moses. I mean, you had no biblical picture. So don't beat yourself up. Anyway, he said, well, look, I want to meet again. So we had a third dinner. And what happened that night changed my life. And I can't help it. Every time I think of that night, I'm afraid I'm not an emotional man, but I get emotional about that night. Because what John Lennox did is he brought with him John chapter 1, verses 1 to 18. And my friend started off ACAT gun question 1 on verse 1, slowing down a bit on verse 2, slowed down a lot more on verse 3, and by the time he got to John 1 verse 4, his ACAT gun jammed. And I sat and watched a man whose nickname is Golden Tonsils. I saw him sit for the rest of the evening with his jaw metaphorically on the dining room table. Because for the first time in his life, he saw the promises of God and he understood them. And he absolutely blew him away. So I rushed Peter from that dinner back to my vicar, who is William Taylor at St Helens Bishopsgate, one of the best Bible teachers of our generation, and said to William, look, you know I'm involved in all kinds of Christian work. I'm a trustee of goodness knows how many trusts, but I have not taught the Bible. Would you please teach me how to teach this book? And we sat down, he very graciously agreed, and he couldn't understand to start with, why was I writing notes? I said, well, for a start, William, if you think I'm going to remember this in the middle of my busy day, you've got another thing coming. And secondly, and very importantly, every meeting I go into, I have an agenda, or there's a contract, or there's something I'm looking at. So I want to have something which I can put on the table, which is the same for me as it is for my friend. And I want to be able to say to my friend, almost like a book club, let's have a look at this book, John, particularly starting with this unique, in the city we call it executive summary, of 18 verses. You would call it elsewhere an overview. It's unique. Why don't you have a cup of coffee with me? We'll have about an hour, and all I'll say to you at the end of having a look at the start of John, did you enjoy that? Would you like to meet again?